Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Just Two Dads with my partner and co-host, Mr. Shawn Francis. I am Brian Altunian, and on this week's episode of Just Two Dads, I think now we're at episode number 103. We're talking about men and vulnerability and emotion and communication, and it's going to be an excellent conversation. This is a topic that is kind of at the forefront of a lot of conversations right now. So hang with us, another episode of Just Two Dads. All right, welcome back, everybody. I am Brian Altunian, along with my partner in Thrive, Mr. Shawn Francis. I want to welcome everybody who's catching us on Facebook Live. Hello, everyone. Leave a comment. Jordan, you're already there. I love you, baby. Thanks for putting a comment. Welcome to the show. If you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel, please subscribe, share with your friends, spread the word. We've been doing this podcast now for almost 2 years. I think
almost
it's
2 years,
Shawn.
Yeah,
this is amazing. Over 100 episodes of this, and we started this because Shawn and I wanted to shine the spotlight on the folks that were serving the special needs community from a whole bunch of different walks of life, from a whole bunch of locations and all over the world. And we're honored to be able to have this platform to just have an open discussion. Hopefully, it will spur some conversation in your home or give you something to think about. If there's topics or subjects that you'd like us to talk about, please put them in the comments and let us know. You can send us an email at wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. If you're catching us on podcast outlets, wherever, welcome. Please, I hope that you share your comments with us via social media. We have an Instagram at We Are Just Two Dads, and you can catch Shawn and I. We're, as discussed yesterday, we are not invisible. We're a little all over the place. And finally, for those in the U.S. Virgin Islands, at WSTX AM radio, hello, and thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Just Two Dads. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that is probably much more common among women. Not a gender, not a no. There's no knocking on any of that, but men, we tend to not talk about vulnerability. We tend to not talk about emotions and not get in touch with our inner feelings. But today we're going to talk about that because for a whole variety of reasons. I think coming out of the pandemic, there's probably been a lot more vulnerability, a lot more issues around mental health, a lot more issues about what's real. And so that's what today's topic is. So before we jump into that, we don't have a guest today, so it's just going to be Shawn and I. I know that's a lot of people are going to go, oh, that's it. We don't want to talk to these guys. But remember, we're just two dads. And we're just talking about subject matters that are important, we think, to everybody. So before we jump into that, Shawn, you're looking sharp, my friend, as always. How are you feeling today?
Thank you. Different. This is part of the reason why we're talking about what we're talking about today. But believe it or not, how do I feel? I feel vulnerable. I feel I have great anticipation and some what's the word I'm looking for? I have positive feelings as well as concern and just acknowledgement about the rate at which time travels. And thinking of maybe a little, not as much about my own mortality. I guess that comes into play, but looking at my son, we had someone that we both know reached out to me, not even reached out to me, actually made a post. And it's funny, let me back up. It's odd that we haven't talked about this before as a subject for the show. And we're going to talk about it again and have someone join us that is an expert in that regard. But it's a lot about how we operate, and we're more vulnerable than most men. And that's where we started. That's how the show began. We're like, you know what? There might be some value in a conversation like this. And we had good people like our friend on St. Croix, Robert Moorhead, who said to us, the conversation that you guys are having, men need to have more of those. So it's interesting that we haven't talked about it before. So it's not something new for us, but there is something going on lately, at least I know, around me, and you mentioned the same thing. And there was a someone that we know made a post on social media about looking for any kind of assistance with their son who has special needs as well, who just graduated high school, in terms of finding a job. And prior to this person making that post, I had already been thinking about, when I look at Elijah, he's now 16. He is a junior.
Yeah,
um,
amazing.
and he's got, and I'm looking at pictures from just a year ago where he had a mustache and, that's it. And now there's like, an actual like beard and stuff. And I'm thinking about, obviously we think about these things all the time. This is why we embarked on a mission to build a bridge between special needs families and the life that they have and the one that that we want, and build it through financial service, education, and opportunity. So we think about, you got to prepare for a time when we exist only in memory. But when that time or time itself is moving and you're looking at your own, it hits you just a little differently. And so how am I feeling? I'm just thinking about Elijah's independence and his future. Not just, oh my gosh, what happens when Laura and I are not here, but like his purpose. There's people in his life that mean something to him, that he goes to school with, classmates and teachers and things like that. But I don't know, outside of us, if he knows what real friendship is like. What will that be like for him in the future? What is he going to do as far as work and purpose? How is he, neurotypical people, we talk about how important it is to chase a goal and a dream. And that while a child can be neglected in the most obvious ways by verbal or physical abuse, another form of childhood neglect is a child who's not raised or not around an environment or people that are chasing some kind of goal or purpose. And that's an issue, generally speaking, with neurotypical. But then when you think of special needs, that applies even more so, right? So again, I don't know if I'm rambling or making sense, but those are the things that are in my head in terms of like, so what's his future going to be like? And I'm not just thinking about what we hope to be a very distant future when we are no longer here, but the next 5 years, what does that look like for him? And I made a post the other day which just said, fellow special needs parents, each of you, wherever you might be, I see you, I hear you, and I love you, because our kids make us so weak yet so strong, and that's a lot of where I'm at. And there's it's fair to say there's a little bit of fear there, but I think one of the things that's worth us talking about today is, your perspective on how do you think, because we talked about how we were each raised and the men that raised us. How do you think being a man has impacted the manner in which you have raised your children, generally speaking, but especially with regard to Jordan, given her diagnosis and given what society says you're supposed to do? Because we also talk about how we had a conversation yesterday about how what society says you're supposed to do is everybody wears a mask to some extent, right? But if a woman masks her emotion, especially her fears, right, or she lets it out and it shows, it's okay, right? A man is not supposed to do that. And if you're working so hard to be someone other than your authentic self, how much of your authentic self do you have to give to the people you love, yourself and or the world? So how do you going back to the question then, that all being said, how do you think that that's impacted your parenting as a man?
Well, I'm not sure exactly. I'll go back to my childhood really quickly to talk about how that's impacted. I mean, if that's the crux of the question. My dad was was sort of from a Middle Eastern family, and so in that kind of family, and as in many cultures, there's a lot of bravado. Men, are strong and they rule the roost, and everybody else is supposed to kowtow. My dad was no exception to that. My dad was, I used to talk about it. I don't know if I talked about it in therapy or what, but where some people command respect, my dad was a person who demanded respect. And I think that there's a lot of men in society that demand it even without doing anything to command it. I think there's a huge difference between those two things, right? Mm-hmm. You demand respect based solely on your position in the family, and while that works in certain cultures, it doesn't work really everywhere. And so that's kind of what I grew up with. And I was not, and I was even as a young child, I wore my emotions kind of, on my sleeve. There were things that I was emotional about. I wasn't whiny. I wasn't, a mama's boy. I hate to use that expression, but that's what people used to say. If you showed any weakness or vulnerability, when we were kids growing up, you're like, oh, you're a mama's boy. That was a bad thing, right?
Yeah, right,
But I
right.
wasn't a whiny, shriveling, flower. I was growing up, but I was growing up in a household where I remember I worked for my dad in his grocery store. I've talked about my dad in his store before, where I was really sick. I was really sick just the day of, and that I was at work, and my dad was like, "Go to work, work through it, that kind of thing." And I remember getting this is going to sound horrible, but getting sick in one of the back rooms, and I went up to his office. I'm like, I don't sure if I can do this today. Like, I'm really sick. I just got sick in the back room, and his first question to me was, not how you doing, or where are you feeling pain, you want to lie down. It was none of that. It was like, did you clean it up? That was his first question.
As
Did
you
you
were
clean it up?
as you were telling us, something told me, is that what he said? Did you
Yeah,
clean it up?
yeah. Did you clean it up? That's what he said. Did you clean it up? And so there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that. What I would call, just like lack of sympathy or lack of empathy. There was a lack of empathy. So going back, as folks who have watched our podcast over the last couple of years, I tend to end the show talking about empathy and love, and they're separate things, right? Empathy and love are separate things, right? Empathy is being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and be able to kind of feel that. But I think my dad had a lack of empathy. It's why empathy is so important to me. As I and by the way, my dad was off doing his own thing. My parents did their own thing, left us to I don't want to say fend for ourselves because that sounds harsh, but they were off doing their own. They were off doing their own stuff. Let me elaborate, and then I'll stop. I'll stop and switch back to you. Because we tend to you guys, if you've seen our show a lot, you know that one of us will talk like for 7 minutes or something and not letting the other have a conversation. It should be a discussion. We switch back and forth on storytelling. It's kind of what we do.
But
All right, but
it is a discussion, though. It's fine. It is a discussion.
okay, good. All right. Well, I'll give you this
Yeah.
example. I'll give this example. So after I stopped working for my dad, which by the way, he was really not happy that I stopped working for him, because his dream was that his children would work for him. That wasn't my dream. And going in the business that we do now, I'm always about pursuing your dream, not pursuing somebody else's dream, right? So I stopped working for him. He had a very difficult time with that. My younger brother, 6 years younger than me, stayed working at the store. Now my dad we were in the grocery business, and we dealt with a lot of cash. Now, and this was back in the day. This is quite a long time ago, folks. So, but my younger brother got held up in the parking lot coming back from the bank. And
Wow.
when I say held up, like face down on the parking lot with a shotgun in the back of his head. He was 18 or 19 years old at the time. And my mom and dad were vacationing in Hawaii, and my brother had come home. Rattled is an understatement. Rattled is an
Sure.
understatement. And I went to the house to be with him because that's what I felt. That's what it called for.
You had
Called the
moved out at this point.
I was in my 20s. I was already gone from that,
Yeah.
and not working for the family. So not working in the family business, living on my own. And then my brother called me. I went over to go see him, called my folks, and the first thing my dad said was, "Well, you got to get back to the store." And he's like, I said, he's not going anywhere. Like this is shaking him up. And he said, well, you cannot show your employees weakness, or it's just going to happen again. So again, there's sort of this macho thing of like what things are supposed to look like, not
Yeah.
taking into account that my brother was like 18 or 19 at the time, and completely like, I don't know if you've ever had that experience of, a masked guy, by the way, three
No.
of them.
And it's funny he's saying it'll happen again unless it's one of the employees. I don't know why it would happen again.
So yeah. So needless to say, my brother did not go back to work. Although eventually he did go back to. He actually was thinking about quitting at the time, but he went back to work for him for a while. But that's just how my dad did things. It was very non-emotional. Go back to work because you don't want to show weakness. Your employees will take advantage of you. And I think that's what we've grown up with in this country. and in much of our, bravado in our country. And, we're seeing a lot of it come out again now, the last several years, where there's a lack of empathy and a disregard for other people and where they, what they may be going through and where they stand. So, I was dealing with my kids, I, tend to be a lot more empathetic, although my wife would say that I don't, my wife at the time, would say, I don't coddle. I don't know how to coddle because I was never really coddled as a child. I don't know how to, I know how to do it. I'm empathetic, but I don't know how to coddle, which is a weird thing. Anyways, all that to say that I treat my children these days with a total understanding of where they are emotionally, and I'm their go-to person. My middle daughter is neurotypical, at the moment lives in Tel Aviv, Israel. She used to tell her girlfriends in college that I'll just say this and then I'll stop. They used to have, like, they were putting their favorite mottos on a t-shirt, things that they
Right.
would say, things that they were known for. And Gabby, my daughter Gabby, her motto was, I have to cry. I need to go call my dad. So that's how my children respond to how I father them, in light of the fact that I grew up in an environment where my dad was like, "Go clean up your
So
mess," and
there's usually one or two paths that people take.
the same
You
or
know,
opposite, right?
exactly. And so it's just by, I almost want to say, roll of the dice, fate, maybe some would say God or whatever have you, because I don't know how safe it is to say which direction a person is going to go, especially as a male, as a boy being raised by a man. Um, I don't know what the signs are that says that someone is going to rebel and do the exact opposite of the example that's given to them, or if they're going to, as a result, like, just almost unwittingly follow the same path. And when it comes to men, that I think the same is true of you know of women. But what happens with men is, you know women do the most immeasurable, invaluable job by bringing us into the world to begin with, right? So a mother's love is just different altogether. But the
Yeah,
thing about being a man is that the type of man you are teaches your son what type of man to be,
yeah,
and at the same time teaches your daughter what kind of man to date. So, I mean, because those are the examples. Like, well, that this is what a man is supposed to be. For a boy, this is how I'm supposed to carry myself. For a girl, this is what I'm supposed to see. Now, of course, then if the example is not necessarily the best, again, dice is being rolled where you might, I'm never going to do that, and you don't know. And then when you come into being a parent, being a father to a child with special needs, I know that in some cases that's why there's you know dads out there that are out there and not there. In other words, like, not present, because they may not be able to cope with the emotion. The conversation we were having the other day, we are just talking about, it's almost difficult for a man in society to say, something, I'm afraid.
yeah,
I just, I'm afraid. I'm going to work it out, but I'm afraid. And it goes both ways, because we talked about, you can't be a victim and a victor at the same time. You can't be a warrior and a warrior. You have to pick. But being a warrior does not mean that you are now devoid of emotion. And being brave does not mean that you're not afraid. It means that you act in spite of your fear, but
yeah.
you acknowledge that it's there. And it's, for some men, it's really, really, really tough and really difficult. And I think it's had such a tremendous adverse effect on society, and will continue to do so. Even though sometimes it feels like we're making some progress, though.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think, men's groups and men's discussion groups, and that we've been a part of various men's groups, and I still think that many of them focus a lot on, you know, the survivor mentality, and getting on, living independently off the grid, as if the revolt against the government, what we need to do as men. I think that there are also, I think there's a lot more value to the kinds of groups where men are okay, they're free and have feel like it's safe to share that kind of conversation. By the way, fear is just one of the emotions. There's a lot of, I'm confused, I'm upset, I'm hurt, I'm, we always say hurt people, right? Hurt people,
Yeah.
hurt people.
Yeah. What hurt? And it's funny. It's almost like that saying should be, so it can be clarified for the average person, is it essentially is what hurt people do is hurt people.
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's one. And then two, as Joe put up on the screen, as we put up on the screen, her comment is, then you have a father who deals with a child with with some form of, I hate using the word disability, but of some special need, of some, medically complex issue. And then now it's a whole new level of vulnerability. And so we even had a mentor in our business who was a guest on our show early on, who never talked about his kids who are on the autism spectrum. He has 5 or now 6. I don't even know how many he's got, because he's become a ward. He's adopted.
Yeah.
He's a bunch. But he has 2 children who are on the autism spectrum. And I remember him not really talking about his children that much, and feeling that his role as the man in his relationship with his wife, his role was to provide. As long as he could provide, as long as he could, make sure that they had access to the resources they needed for whatever they needed, he was doing his job. When his wife would say that all she really wanted was for him to spend time with his children and spend time in that space, maybe just for empathy himself, but also just to get an understanding of, the needs that our children with special needs have are just that. They're just special. They're just a little bit more than other people. So it's interesting how men, that we admire and that we respect, still to sometimes have difficulty sharing that vulnerability as if it's a weakness. And that was for my dad. That was his thing. My dad was, if you showed vulnerability, it was a weakness. I've had conversations with other men that talked about, when our leaders show any kind of emotion, our political leaders show any kind of emotion, that shows weakness. And other countries, that have that sort of caste system probably feel that way too.
Right.
But talk to women in the year 2022, they would say that a man who shows vulnerability actually is showing strength. And I think that that's the thing that we need to remember more than anything, is that for, man, it's okay. It's okay to show vulnerability. It's okay. It shows that you have strength in who you are as a human being and strength in your relationships, that you can be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help. I was not one who asked for a lot of help when I was younger. And part of it was because the first few times that I asked for help, I was met with not a great response. And so I didn't ask for help a lot. That goes all the way back to the time I was almost an infant. Not that I asked for help, but my mom used to brag. We used to tell this story. My mom used to brag that I would wake up in the morning and she would put me in my playpen, and I would be totally fine there for hours alone. And I thought, after a while, I got to be an adult. I said to her, I don't think you want to brag about that. That almost sounds like child neglect to some degree. But her point was, oh yeah, you were independent from the time that you were an infant, an infant in my diaper in the playpen, and she'd leave me alone for hours.
Independent with a rash.
Independent with a rash. But that was her thing, right? Oh no, you could stand on your own, you could do your own thing, you did your own thing, you were independent, you didn't need help. The great thing about you is you didn't need help. You never asked for help. You always, got along to get along, kind of thing. And for a long time in my family, that was acknowledged and sort of rewarded. But it also trained me not to ask for help. It trained me not to be vulnerable, not to ask for support, not to ask for help. Yeah. And I'll just say this one last thing in this. And for those who have watched the show or those who know me personally, I've been married twice and divorced twice. And never thought that I would be that person. I always thought that I would be married to the one person for the rest of my life. And so the first one was tough enough, and then the second one was nearly devastating. And there were times in the aftermath of that over the last several years where, that combined with, the pandemic and other things, where my mental health was not great. And, I entertained thoughts of, what would it be like if I weren't around? What would the world look like? Mm-hmm. And I had a very wise friend of me who said to me, she had said to me, just so you know, like the sun's still going to come up tomorrow, and people are going to live their lives tomorrow, and people are going to have challenges in their life tomorrow, and still have to pay their bills. They're still going to make money. They're still going to win baseball games. Life goes on, whether you're here or not. The world's a better place with you in it. So, hang out and, play it out. Just go for one more day. As we talk about that one more concept our friend Ed Milet talks about. But there are, that was a time when I did. Luckily, first of all, I had our business. I had close relationships that were, that helped me.
And I was going to ask you that if you've had friends, and obviously you do, I like to consider myself one of them.
You, 100%.
But I was going to ask, do you have other male friends in particular who you can be like, here's what I'm kind of thinking and feeling?
So here's the great thing about what we do, Shawn, not just this podcast, but the work that we do professionally. Our company is such a great company because we see people in all aspects of their lives, and they're dealing with their financial future and their dreams and their goals. We talk a lot about dreams and goals. And I think that what that does is it creates a sense of empathy among the men in our company. Whereas the financial field is generally filled with a bunch of, gray-haired, stodgy old men, who are just looking at numbers and, trends and that type of thing. Our business tends to have people who are a lot more empathetic. And luckily, through this business, there are a number of men that that I have close friendships with and close relationships with. And I can distinctly, name, 3 or 4 of them that really were there for me, helping me through that time, just as a matter of support. Safe places that I could go and say, hey, I need some help. I need some support here. I'm kind of stuck. I'm not sure what I need to do. Help me get over it. So the great thing about it is I think if it wasn't an environment that encouraged and supported that safe place, it would have been much more difficult. And so I think the point of this conversation today, and just everybody, so everybody knows, today's topic was Shawn's topic. Shawn's like, I want to talk about it. I'm like, why do you want to talk about that? And now here I am like going and I'm rambling. Anytime I resist anything that Shawn recommends, it's probably because it's the one thing I most likely need to talk about myself. So thank you, by the way.
Thank you. That means a lot to me because I don't, I try my best to live as purposeful a life, or a life of as much intention as possible. And some people might be surprised. That's a real struggle for me because I'm kind of like, you know what? This is what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to go. Here's where we're going to go. Very instinctive. And that's a good thing. But if you don't have the other stuff, it doesn't let you know. And you confirm my desire to make sure that I keep my consciousness raised and listen and be more intentional, because the more intention you put out there, the more that comes back. And as we're talking about this, it's hitting me that because we have that, it becomes very easy to take for granted the notion that, most guys have that. People don't. And so here's an example. My dad still is, a man's man, but he worked for someone else for a very short period of time. I was like, I'm not doing that. And his father, who died when I was very, very young, so I have no memory of him, he and my grandmother were the epitome of the skit from, in Living Color, the Caribbean Family. Which is, you have a job where you do one thing. When I was your age, I did 3 things. I was the cook, the dishwasher. So, growing up, they did, not only did they not finish high school, I don't think either one of them made it to high school, right? But they had a Chrysler dealership, local transit, all this stuff on St. Thomas. And so, but my dad is an evolved man in that I could speak to him. And the older I get, the more true this becomes. Speak to him about anything. I could do the same with my grandmother. Despite having that support system, while I have never had any thought of harming myself, in my lowest points, I've thought about, like you said, what would the world be like without me, right? And when I think about what the world would be like without me, I actually then get scared because I'm like, oh my gosh. And that's when I realize I'm a person that has grown up with a fear of death, right? My great grandmother was the first person that I knew that passed away. And so I didn't like funerals, and I just like, just the idea of death at all. I come to realize that most people that fear death, if you really stop and think about it, there's a good chance you're less afraid of death than you are afraid of living a life not fulfilled. And being one of those people who's an example of the graveyard is the place where there's the greatest inspiration, the greatest songs, the greatest ideas, um, the greatest accomplishments, because they die inside of most people, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I arrive at that thought when I've thought of, what would the world be like without me? Well, not that people are going to miss me, but what'll happen is there's things they'll never know. The difference I could make would never have come to be.
Yeah.
And that is something that really gets at me more than anything else. And so, and that's with support. So then think of someone who doesn't know how to ask for help, who doesn't have anything to buck the trend that society has set as far as a man goes, where you're supposed to talk about, hey, look, I'm afraid of this, and raise your hand. And if that dad is a parent to a child with special needs, hopefully you're someplace listening, and we're connecting with you, because the idea and the fact and the truth of the matter is you're not alone, and you're not the only one that's afraid. And just because you may be afraid and not have a set of resources to turn to, at least that you know of, that's what we're here for. And we're here to build a bridge between those people out there, those men out there that feel that way. You were talking about men's groups earlier. One of the ones that we both joined, I was like, yeah, okay, I trusted the people that were running it. But I have to be honest, when I first thought of a men's group, I was just like, men's group? I just imagine that being guys that have knives in their shoes instead of shoelaces, and that when they want to grow a beard, they just go push one out, and on demand. And there's an old skit on Saturday Night Live. I don't know what it was called, but each one would be like, I am grizzly, I am more grizzly, I am grislier. And they would just go back and forth, and I killed my kill, I killed what killed my kill. There's just fight to see who's the roughest of the roughest, devoid of emotion. Yeah. And that doesn't serve anybody. That just doesn't serve anybody at all.
No. No. Listen, you bring up a good point. I will say this again, going back to my dad. My dad never said, I'm sorry. My dad never said, by the way, so if anybody's listening to this, and or if it's your partner or somebody in your family, if that's a thing where they don't know how to even say I'm sorry, that's probably a sign of somebody who's not really in touch with their emotions.
Somebody that's hurt. And let me ask you this, because you don't want to make this about your dad, because if you guys haven't talked a lot, if he hears this, it's probably not going to exactly help. But then again, you never know. Have you ever witnessed anyone challenge him on that? And I don't even mean get in his face. Just be like, do you know something? Do you realize that I've never once seen you say I'm wrong, or that I'm sorry? Ever? Do you realize that? Has anyone ever even pointed that out? Or
no, I don't think so.
The relationship such that nobody tells him that?
Yeah, it was a king on the throne kind of thing. Nobody told the emperor he had no clothes on, right? So
somebody needs to love him enough to tell him that there's no clothes.
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, in a way, well, here's the interesting thing about it. My dad's dream in life was always to go to retire in the state of Hawaii, preferably completely on his own, without any family around, and do his own thing and live out his days. And by the way, that is exactly what he's done. He's pushed enough people away from him to actually fulfill that ultimate dream, where he didn't have to say I'm sorry to anybody. Honestly, didn't have to. My dad had his own challenge. My dad. I think a lot of people who come off with a lot of bravado and a lot of guff, and I think those are the folks that probably have the lowest amount of self-esteem, and that the only way to establish that is to take a position. There are also people but my dad is not this kind of person. There are people who feel that the only way that they can have some sort of altitude is to make sure that they knock other people down, right? Because there are people who will say, don't have to say I'm better than you, but you're less than.
Not
right?
good enough. You're saying he's not that kind of person, or what?
He's not that kind of. He was not a kind of person that knocked people down in order for him to have altitude. But there's similar paths, right? There's still there's still I'm not going to say I'm sorry, and and I'm the father, and this is just what you're going to do
one is
because
a jab, one is a jab, the other is a haymaker, but they're both making contact.
for sure. That's kind of the thing, and I think that's kind of the point. So as men, we look at our lives and look at our situations. And first, we all know there's nothing wrong with saying I'm sorry. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you're wrong. There's nothing wrong with allowing other people to shine with a little brighter light than you. As a matter of fact, in a relationship, by the way, I've learned quite a bit in my so many years. That it's okay. Not only is it okay, it's actually a sign of strength to allow those people around you to shine with a brighter light than you sometimes. It doesn't make you a background person. It makes you a support.
Yeah, and you don't have to dim another person's light in order for yours to shine.
For sure.
In fact, myth.
In fact, yours shines more when you are lifting up those that shine brightly, because that is,
by contributing to somebody else's light, all you're doing is brightening your own. Yeah,
absolutely. So I would say this, for me, and again, not that we need to get too personal, but after my second divorce, I decided to spend time. First of all, I sought out help, and I was in a lot of conversation with folks, so I got a lot of that support. I got a lot of reminders of, to your point that you were just making, Shawn, not just what would the world be like without me. My favorite movie is It's a Wonderful Life. Probably not a surprise. But not just what the world be like without me, but what more can I actually do in my life in the future, right? That's kind of the point that you were making. And so I had a lot of those conversations. Like, if you think you are done, you've hit some age, or you've retired, or you've had some accomplishment, and you're like, oh, that's it, I'm done. I'm gonna retire and just enjoy, like my dad. I'm just gonna go off to Hawaii and live the rest of my life in Hawaii, and I'll be happy. Then you're shortchanging a huge amount of opportunity. And that was one of the things that called me forth. I spent a lot of time working on myself, working on my own, my own strengths. And even in our business, I went from being the guy that was doing all the work to being the guy that was lifting people on our teams, lifting people in our business, serving the special needs community, doing this podcast with you to shine the light on people who serve our community. And in doing that, which is so great, like in doing that and focused on me and what was sort of missing for me, the great thing is that all the things that I thought I was not capable of in relationships and whatnot, it's all now starting to happen. Like, in a new relationship that is unlike anything I've ever been in before, that is, above and beyond what I even thought A, was possible, and B, was something that I was going to be a part of.
And you realize too, just something I don't know if you thought of. On one hand, so you're in this relationship, you're just happy and loving all this kind of stuff. And you're like, this person is great. This is great. This is great. This is happening. Ever stop to think that there's a chance that could never happen before? Because you probably ask yourself, gosh, where has this been all my life? You have beautiful products of past relationships in the form of your children, but you're still like, why did I have to go through anything that wasn't quite this in order to get to this? Have you ever stopped to think that wasn't going to happen because the person that was in those relationships is not the person I'm talking to right now?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. No, you're right.
And that's where you give yourself credit for growing, because that's what it's all about. Anything else is, less than, is dying. I heard somebody talking the other day about, again, getting back to everything we're talking about, men and being able to reach out. When people talk about going to a therapist, you ever stop to think that sometimes therapy is not someone having you sit on their couch and they're, well, so tell me about your childhood. Well, even if someone says, tell me about it's someone that's listening, and you're playing a role in therapy also, because part of therapy is talking and hearing yourself,
Yeah.
One of the best books out there is a book by Shad Helmstetter called What to Say When You're Talking to Yourself, right? That's
I've seen that.
That's a level of raising consciousness. In other words, you think about what you think about. So the first person to have therapy with is yourself, right? Because the bottom line is that's happening anyway. So if you don't think about what you think about, you're just walking around putting things in your head that you have no conscious idea. And if it's subconscious, that means it's bionic in terms of power, right?
Yeah.
It's so much stronger than what you intentionally say, because it's habitual. It's what you instantly do. It's like drawing a breath. So if you can catch it and stop and think about it, that's the first form of therapy. So for anybody that's listening, that's kind of like, gee, I don't know where to turn. Stop and think about what you want and start having a conversation with the person that you are about what it is that you want. So you get to the path of becoming who it is you want to become. And then you can reach out and find resources. And if you have no idea where to turn, again, whatever answers we don't have, we serve as a conduit towards anybody, but especially people in the special needs community that is in a gap between the life that they have and the one that they want to have. And we want to be the guys in the room who raise their hand when someone says, does anybody know a good plumber? Literally and or figuratively. It's such a great feeling when I can answer that question for somebody, and then I get the feedback that, you know what, that guy that you connected me with took care of the problem, and it was just, thank you so much. And as a result, become that person people reach out to you and ask you. And no matter what it is that you're going through, you're not alone. And your biggest fears, and I'm talking about the biggest nightmares that you have, the ones going back to the subconscious that you don't tell anybody about, there is someone on this planet of 3 billion plus for whom that is a dream.
For sure. I mean, listen, it's interesting because I think that a couple things, right? And to your comment was one, I needed to talk to the person in the mirror, right? Two, I needed to talk to my peers just as mirrors as well, right? Because in talking to them, as you said, when talking therapy, a lot of times you talk in therapy or sometimes you just need to hear it out loud. You just need it. You also, the thing is to think that no matter where we are, and again, I'm a big fan of spirituality. I'm a big fan of, higher power, and it doesn't really matter what your background is religion-wise. If you believe in a higher power, gratitude is such a great place to come from on a regular basis, right? Being grateful for where you are, even in the worst situation, because to your point, exactly your point. Your nightmare is somebody else's dream. Be grateful for where you are. Be grateful for that spot. Those were, in combination for me, those were the things that helped me get to the next level. And then look at those areas where I would take and still, take responsibility for the failures of my marriages. I by the way, both of my ex-wives, again, married twice, I love and admire and respect for who they are, and they're phenomenal mothers of my children. But I wasn't that. I took responsibility for my participation for my role. And so being able to do that gave me an opportunity to reflect and say, well, what do I want from the future? Not that I wanted a relationship, not that I was looking for a relationship, by the way, but what do I want in the future for my life? Where do I want to be? How do I want to stand? I used to talk to my daughter, Jordan, all the time, talk to my kids. Like, if you have a child that causes a lot of, a lot of upheaval in school, is always the one in trouble, in school, by the way. I used to say to her, just think about that. Like, years from now, are you going to be remembered as, oh yeah, remember her? She was always, trouble in school. And I wasn't trying to pick on her. I was just we were just sort of talking about, calling yourself forth from the future, looking back at where you are now. Who do you want to be? How do you want to be known? And again, not that I care that much about how other people think about me, but for me, I'm just to finish this thought, who I want to be as a man, as a father, as a partner, as a businessman, as a philanthropist. Who do I want to be in the world? What's the mark I want to leave? What's the legacy I want to leave behind? And for all of those in my family that have gone before, thankfully we've had Ed Milet as an ongoing mentor, and so take a lot of his communication to heart. Standing on the shoulders of those that went before me, honoring them, honoring the sacrifices that they made so that I could have the life that I have. Am I doing them a service, or am I doing them a disservice by not living fully into the person that they thought I would be, that God set out for me to be?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that called me forth. Those are the things that make up who I am today, that
Yeah.
enabled me, by the way, to find the relationship that I never thought I would experience, to have a
Mm-hmm.
relationship with my children I never thought I'd have, and which I love all of them dearly, and to have, the kind of friendships that I have. And, so again, all that to say, if I wasn't in a place of acknowledging my vulnerability and acknowledging the issues that I was going through and talking about mental health, talking about these things with you and with people like you in my life, I don't know if I would have gotten to this stage. I think I, could easily see that I could have ended up a miserable person and, maybe not be here this long. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
thankfully, I've chosen to pursue a path of, of
Enlightenment.
making a difference, of a total enlightenment.
And that's where, for some people, the mask fits so well, you don't even know that it's there. Again, getting back to subconscious and the habit. Most of us don't even really know who we are, right?
Yeah.
Where because we start out with something close to that when you're born. And if there's this thing about who you're supposed to be, especially again for anybody, but especially going back to being a man, when emotion is taken out of the equation, or supposed to be, if you're better at it, then you're not your best self. You don't even know who you are,
Yeah.
And so, again, the hope today is that for any dads that are out there, and for some of you, your family may have been pushed away as a result of your inability to come forth and admit, what it is that you're feeling, or what it is that you're not feeling, what's missing, right? We're on this planet for a very short period of time. Tomorrow is a bunch of things, and a promise is not one of them. So the blessing that we get out of the journey of being the best that we can be is one reason why we should be the best that we can. And we can't do that if we don't figure out who we are, and screw what society says about not showing emotion. And again, it's not about wearing every single thing on your sleeve, right? But about being your most true, authentic self as a man, right? The next thing is that for all the people, and for some of you, I'd have to really stop and think about this. And I want anybody's driving, pull over, stop and listen to this. I dare to think this might have some value. For all the people that you think could benefit from your success, or you being the best version of yourself, and let's limit success to just best version of yourself. That could be a certain amount of money. That could be just the joy you get from fulfilling a goal or dream, whatever the case might be. For all the people that you think might benefit from it, and for those of you that don't think anybody will, stop and think for a minute, because there's more answers in silence than there are in noise, right? For all the people that you think could benefit from it, there are significantly more people that would not only benefit from it, but need you to be successful. And
For sure.
some of them may not even be born yet.
Mm.
Some of them may not even be born yet. That doesn't mean that you have to become famous. That doesn't mean that at all. But each of us, if you think of, a stream and the way that it flows, the smallest pebble can change the most direction of where that stream goes. And we didn't create this world. Therefore, we are not perfect beings. So we're not in a position to say how we will impact people around us that are seen and unseen, to say nothing of those that are unborn.
Mm. Interesting.
You know?
I think that's powerful. And again, now I'm going to quote Ed Milet. You guys think that we're doing this is Ed Milet should sponsor our show. I think we should get Ed as a sponsor on our show, because we talk about Ed all the time. Not to mention the fact that I've got his book literally standing behind me, so that everybody can see the title right there, perfectly situated. But there are two things that he said and has said recently that has resonated with me, and it's exactly what you're talking about. First of all, God doesn't call the qualified, right? God qualifies the called. So you may be in your situation and think, I don't have the qualifications to make a difference in anybody's life, right? But that's not, he's not calling you. He's not calling you because you're qualified or not qualified. He'll qualify you if you get the calling, right? If you're there to serve other people, that's what qualifies you. And the second piece that goes hand in hand with that is oftentimes those of us who feel that we have been, shortchanged or we're not qualified to help another person, usually it's exactly that thing that you think disqualifies you that actually completely 100% qualifies you to help you in somebody else's situation. If you've been through a bankruptcy and survived, and you know what that's like, you're absolutely qualified to guide people who are struggling and figuring out bankruptcy is a path for them. Or if you
Absolutely.
have suffered from some sort of mental illness and you have struggled and come through, you are absolutely qualified to help somebody who's struggling with their mental health. So the thing that which you think disqualifies you absolutely 100% qualifies you to help those
Yeah.
folks. So the thing that people forget is that you always have something to contribute. There's always something you can make a difference, and that the ripple effect that you just talked about with the pebble in the stream is it'll impact the people in your lives and the people
Mhm.
not even yet in your life, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
brilliant and so powerful. I think it's
Yeah.
brilliant.
The best person to serve the person you were. Now you say the person you were because that's why you should, you're going to go through some things, but that's why it is valuable to grow through it, and that's why becoming the best you is worthwhile. Because that person you leave behind, the best person to serve that person or the people that are in that position is who you become, right? So there's no better person to serve people in a position or situation that you were once in than someone who's been through it. But it's funny, as a society, we won't ask that of people that are supposed to be serving us in certain situations. Well, have you been through this? Have you experienced that? Nobody even stops to think about that. Do you know what I mean? Just like,
For
a
sure.
a person who is bad with money should not be someone that helps someone figure out their money. But a person who was bad with money and has come through that, you know, that's a totally different situation. It's just like when, they say, you should never taste the food. I don't know if I believe it, but you should never taste the food of a skinny chef, you know. Um, you should always question the value of an overweight personal trainer, or out of shape or whatever have you, because they're still in the midst of the challenge. That doesn't mean that anybody's less. But if I can tell you that, you look and see who I am now, this is who I was. Wow. Doesn't that look kind of like where you are? Here, let me tell you how I got through that. That's everything. That is everything. We are so much more valuable to each other than we think.
That and by the way, I don't disagree with what you're saying. The only thing I'm going to add to that is those that are in the midst of their path are not any less qualified to help people. If you have a desire to be of service to somebody,
Mhm.
then then you should take that calling on. Just because you
Oh, yeah.
haven't lost the weight doesn't mean you shouldn't try to help people who are trying to lose weight, right? If you
Yeah.
haven't completely solved the problem yet, but you're in process of solving the problem, that
As
still
long as you're in a
qualifies you to help
process, yeah,
people.
because you still have something to offer. You still have movement
Yeah.
as an example and something to offer. And again, that's the reason why we should, you know, uh, be the best that we possibly can be. And that's also why, again, as men, if you're going through something, it's worthwhile to, here's the other thing too. If you speak up and let it be know what you're going through, you'd be surprised. And for some, depending on what you're going through, this might be tough to grasp if what you're facing as a challenge is just too much weight to even bear. But if you raise your hand, you stand up and step forward and let it be known what you're going through, there is some relief that comes from just connecting with someone that is in the same situation as well.
For sure. We just did a podcast with one of our friends and colleagues in the special needs community, Rob Gorski, who is online as the Autism Dad. And we were talking about a lot about this subject on our podcast visit with him yesterday. And he is one who shares his vulnerability and the
Mm.
challenges that he's facing on a on a regular basis. It's not as a form of complaint, but just a form of acknowledging what he's going through. And he's taken on something I really highly recommend you look him up as the Autism Dad, Rob Gorski. The Autism Dad's an amazing podcast, and he does a lot of the same stuff. And we are very much aligned in our efforts as dads in the special
Yep.
needs community. The other thing I want to say is if this is an interesting topic to you, and it's something that you want to look at for yourself. And again, you should be endorsing our show, but I'm going to make a couple of recommendations. First of all, Ed's book, The Power of One More. Those who are seeing us on video, it's behind me. The Power of One More is such an amazing book, guide to his philosophy. It's his second book. His first one was called Max Out Your Life. Really in a mode of maxing out. He has his own podcast, Ed Milet. He posts on social media, Ed, Mylett, Ed Milet. And he just launched his own show called Change with Ed Milet on the Nosy streaming platform. On my smart TV, I got Nosy TV. I don't have TV, but I've got Nosy there. But Nosy is an app you can download and see Change with Ed Milet, and the conversations he's having, the conversations with people very similar to what we're talking about today, vulnerability, and you'll see the power of his philosophy on folks. And yeah, there it is, The Power of One More. A lot of that stuff that we've talked about today, God qualifying the called, and the disqualifications that make us qualified to help other people, that come right out of that book, and out of his speeches around that. But huge fan of Ed Milet, and anybody in the field of self-improvement, personal development. There's a lot more of it these days than there used to be back in the day. As men, fathers of children who are diagnosed with special needs, I will tell you this: Shawn and I, and Rob, and other dads that we have spoken to on this platform, we know what you are going through. We've been through what you are going through. We've come out the other side. We're a safe place to have a conversation. We're a safe place to give you a place to start. So, if you're a spouse of a dad who's struggling with a child with special needs, hopefully you'll share this with your spouse or your ex-spouse, and maybe we'll make a difference in people's lives. Shawn, I didn't really want to have this conversation today, yet for some reason it's beautiful. Thank you for recommending it. We're getting close to the end of our episode, but thank you for bringing it up. It's a conversation that just so you guys know, Shawn, I've been friends for 7 years. We talk about this stuff all the time when it's just the two of us on the phone. So we've been talking about this for 7 years. It's what makes us, truly love each other for the men that we are in the world and who we are for our families. So I thank you. And by the way, also goes to our production partner, our producer in Hawaii, Mr. Sean Hall. We've had some of these conversations with Shawn as well, and also a fiercely devoted man to his family, and we love Sean Hall very much. And so, anyways, we're here to serve everybody. We hope that you got some value out of today's conversation. Share with us comments, and Shawn has put a lot of stuff in the chat, so you can find Ed Milet, The Autism Dad, The Power of One More. Thank you for being here. Empathy and love, I talk about all the time, only because I get to talk first when we sign off. I know Shawn feels the same way. Look at somebody's situation, have some empathy. You have no idea what they're going through. You have no idea what they're dealing with. Have some empathy before you judge. Have some empathy. Be more curious than judgmental. And finally, look at the world through the lenses of love. I promise you the world's going to look different. If you've ever been in love, the world looks different through the lenses of somebody in love. So I would say, highly recommend, fall in love with your family, fall in love with yourself, fall in love with your situation, fall in love with your special needs family member, fall in love all over again, and look how different the world looks. And with that, I'm going to say thank you for joining us today. I'm going to throw it over to Shawn to sign us off for the wrapping our show up here tonight.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Before I give the obvious thanks, I'm going to thank someone that, he was a guest on our show and we were on his. I think it's coming up on a year at this point. David Hirsch, who has the Dad to Dad podcast and has the Special Dads Network. And he actually, gives out little coins like this to dads that, it says commitment, love, patience, and honesty. And again, you would be surprised that we haven't had a conversation about vulnerability. I haven't had that conversation with him. but I wanted to give a great shout out to him as well. Again, we're here to shine a light on people that serve the community. That's what the show is all about. Remember that questions are so much more powerful than statements, and that we all need to be seen. We need to be heard. We need to be loved, and we need to know that we matter. I want to thank the women in my life without whom I would not be. That is my mom, Jan, and my amazing wife, Laura. And thank you all for tuning in. And we'll be sharing with you our commitment again to impact the lives of 1,000 families in the next 12 months through financial literacy, education, and opportunity. And wherever you are, we love you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.